Hey kids, welcome to the Far Out Podcast. How you doing today? Well, I'm doing pretty great. Thank you for asking. And I'm doing great because this episode in particular is very special to me because at the time that you're listening to this and the day that this will be uploaded being the 24th, November 24th, 2025 marks 1 year of the Far Out Podcast. A year! I've been doing this for a year. And like to me, that's crazy. Like, and I mean this sincerely. I don't mean this as a joke or as some kind of humble brag type thing, but like it truly feels like I'm just getting started, and like with this podcast, as I said in the very first week and as leading up to the recording of this episode, I went back and I listened to my own stuff to just kind of catalog audio quality, my own thoughts, how I did things, and so on and so forth. And what's interesting is that, like, as I said in the very first episode a year ago, I said that this has been a long time coming, and that it's true. It's like, I went to school for radio. I went to school for communications, more specifically speaking. But for me, it was to get into the world of radio because I love radio so much. And for years after I got my degree, I didn't pursue it. I grew in appreciation of it and in respect for it, and I'd kind of look at things every now and then, but I never really dove in. And I had people tell me that, look, in lieu of getting it as an actual job and going somewhere and pursuing that, financially and professionally, you should start a podcast. You should just do something to satisfy this craving that you have now that you have, some schooling under your belt. And for years, I just didn't do it because honestly, and this is truly the truth, is that I was chasing perfection. I thought, yes, I will do a podcast at some point, but I want to make sure I have the best laptop, the best mics, the best soundproof room. I can't put out anything half baked because in the world of broadcasting and just podcasting, I'm late to the party. There's Joe Rogan and there's Theo Vaughn, and just throw a dart and someone somewhere has a podcast who's been doing it much longer than me, who has a team of people who do graphics, intro music, transitions. I thought I need to get on their level to start this thing. And I realized that in doing that I was just weighing myself down. I was just putting on these weights, and I was putting on these bumpers, and they kept me from doing what I wanted to do, which is this very podcast, because I thought, again, I need to be like everybody else. And then I had this point where I realized, well, look, everyone starts from somewhere, and it's almost always, zero. Even if you have like a cool like investor, or if you have like a team of people, everyone still has the first step, the first episode, the first recording, the first release, and who knows what'll go on with that. And like, so for me, there was this notion of like, yeah, I can wait for perfection to arrive and I can try to chase that, but I'll never truly acquire it no matter what kind of equipment I get. I should just put something out. And I remember some specific things about the very first episode. I remember some things, but not all things. Like I remember I was driving back from Minneapolis and I was listening to an episode of Joe Rogan. I don't know why I was in Minneapolis, and I don't know what episode of the podcast I was listening to. But, like over the course of the life of this podcast, I've cataloged many of my trips to Minneapolis. So that could have been for a concert, for a sporting event, for, whatever. I love that commute. It gives me a lot of time to think and reflect and work on things. And I was listening, it was late at night, and I was listening to Joe Rogan, and it was some episode, and I was laughing so hard that I thought this might be a hazard to me driving. Like it was one of those things where like I was so into it. And I remember I pulled off at a gas station in Alexandria. And as I was getting fuel and food, I was thinking this episode is so great. Whoever he's talking to, it's not an interview, it's just a conversation. They're just talking about whatever comes to mind, which is which is kind of the best part about Joe Rogan, is that like he can have on an astronaut or whatever, and at some point he will get off of the field of space and he'll be like, so what's your thoughts on jujitsu? Have you tried this new kind of burger that McDonald's released? Like, they'll just talk about anything, no matter who the person is. Of course, if he has on a politician, they're going to talk politics and whatnot. And if he has on, Neil deGrasse Tyson, he'll talk about astrophysics and stuff like that. But, nothing's off the table. And I was enjoying the freeness of their conversation, that it truly made me want to start that, to do that. I wanted to be in that room with them. I wanted to be a part of that conversation. I wanted to have conversations like that myself. And I thought, this is what I want the podcast to be, whatever my podcast would end up being. And I thought, well, honestly, the best way for me to just start it is to literally just begin to just stick a mic in my face, hit record, and then I just talk, and that's what it was. And if you listen back to that first episode, I mean, I say outright, like, this is inspired by Joe Rogan. I don't know what I want this to be. I don't know how this is going to go. Is it going to be week to week, bi-weekly, once a month? Am I going to talk about sports, movies? Like, nothing was off the table. And like, you go back and you listen to that first episode too, my audio quality is woof, but again, I've had audio issues, that are persistent throughout the lifetime of this. But yeah, it's just interesting to see not only how I've developed as a speaker, as as someone, as I try to literally find the words for, to say on things. There is a bit more structure to this than I ever thought there would be. Like, I go back and I listen to that first episode and I'm like, I'm not going to edit anything. Whatever happens on the mic, that's what gets released. If, I sneeze, it's going in. If my place gets broken into after I handle that situation, well, then by golly, it's going to go up on the podcast feed, because I'm not going to re-record, and I'm not going to edit anything because that's dumb. Well, no, that did not persist, because I got editing software, I got new mics, I started to write out literal notes that I would refer to, and stuff like that. And now there is a bit of structure. It's still pretty loose in my opinion, because again, I'm trying to emulate Joe Rogan, but yeah, it is still very free flowing, kind of in this nature that I'm speaking right now. This is really just off the dome here. But yeah, look, I remember when I launched that first episode. I mean, I think I recorded the first episode the same night I listened to that podcast of Rogan's. So by the time I got back to my place in Fargo, again, it was very late on my commute, and I either recorded that night or I got up the next thing and I recorded the first thing in the morning. I can't really remember, but it was just kind of this thing of just releasing it and seeing what would happen. And as I said in the first episode, I said I hope that, well, I had an understanding that once again I'm a small fish in a big pond, and so I thought, over the course of a couple weeks, a couple months, maybe even a few years, I could get a steady following, maybe a couple subscribers, maybe a consistent viewer count of, 30, 40, 50 people, who knows, and when I created the first episode and I created it as a link, I just sent it out to everyone in my phone. And I mean that sincerely. I put it on Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, and then I sent out texts, just links to people. And there were a lot of contacts in my phone that I had not spoken to for a long time, but I just kind of did like a click all type thing and just sent it out, seeing what would happen. And the response to that was truly, it was mostly positive. Honestly, it was overwhelmingly positive. What the portion of it that was positive was very, very supportive. It was people saying, about time, this is right up your alley, good, I can't wait, where's the next one? That was fun. Sky's the limit. Then there were a few people who were like, who's this? Because again, I hadn't talked to them in a while. And then there was also a sect of people who are like, you haven't talked to me in months or years, and the first thing you do is you promote your thing on me, like, screw you. And I was like, that's fair. And then other people. There was some other people too who were like, I'm not going to listen to your podcast. Like I like you, but your opinions are stupid. And I'm like, you know what? That's also fair. So yeah, and also look too, for people that actually like know me, like those who I actually interact with, like when I go out to eat or I get invited to something, you know, I'm a very social person, and I know I can talk too much. I know that. I'm not trying to again humble brag here, but like I know the kind of person I am. Like I don't shut up. Like if you get me on something, I will talk about it very passionately and very honestly. And I'm also a comedian at heart, and so I constantly try to make people laugh. I love making people laugh, but I know that that can be annoying as well. I'm just speaking honestly and truthfully, and all that stuff. But I'm very thankful to have the friend group and you know, the social circle that I do that seem to appreciate, my social, you know, offerings when it comes to conversation and jokes and whatnot. But look, I understand that like, you know, for people that interact with me, they get their fill of me when we do things together. So then I'm asking people, oh, by the way, I know you and I just spoke, but do you now want to listen to me via the internet? Here's my podcast. So like I kind of had this thought that like, yeah, my friends are gonna support it. They might say good job and stuff, but like they're not gonna listen because they already talk to me. It's like why would you want more of me like just consistently? And again, I'm not saying that to try to, you know, self-deprecate here. I'm just speaking honestly. Like, it would, I don't know how quick I would rush to someone else's stuff over and over again if I'm constantly with them. So like just looking back on week 1, the response I got to that podcast, to that upload was it was more than I thought I'd get, both in terms of views, comments, subscribes. I mean, I really thought I was just kind of throwing a coin in a wishing well. I thought it was going to be a drop in a bucket. It turned out it kind of made a splash, and so I was really thankful, and I am still truly thankful to those who not only listened to it themselves but also shared it with other people, and then who also talked to me about it just afterwards. Like in real life, people were like, I listened to it, it was great, like keep going. The response was truly supportive, and it went beyond people that I just expected to be supportive, like my mom and my dad, shout out my parents, so just thank you again for truly giving me that kind of groundswell support, you know for its inception, and then just going on to like week 2, and this won't be like a week by week breakdown thing, but like, again, I understood that getting in the podcast world, I was kind of on the back foot here because I didn't have anything. I didn't have a logo. The most I had was a name, the Far Out Podcast. And even then, going back to week 1, I said I'm not married to that name, and I truly wasn't. I truly wasn't married to it. It wasn't like, you know, I didn't think it was the greatest idea, but I called it that just because I'd quite literally say that's far out, you know, in my day-to-day life and whatnot. But anyway, the name kind of stuck and everything. And going on to week 2, by week 2, I already had a bit of professionalism to this thing because a friend of mine named Sara, shout out Sara, she made a graphic for me. And she made the logo, the graphic that you're seeing, the logo that you're seeing, the intro that you see with the lava lamp effect. That was all made by a friend of mine named Sara. And I did not ask her to do that. She made it just of her own free will, the kindness of her heart. She did it just to be supportive. And again, it just blew my mind how supportive people were from the get-go, and then returning literally week to week, but again, by week 2, to already have my name kind of cemented in a piece of art, in a piece of graphical art that a friend of mine made. I was like, well, I have to stick with it now. I have to continue now. She made me this cool thing, you know, I can't not use it. And like the graphics that she made, I still use and I still love them, and I have not adjusted them. Like what she made is what's here because I think it's that great. And so like, shout out to Sarah. Thank you for doing that. Truly, just out of the kindness of her own heart. I mean, that was really really awesome and really unexpected, but it was a true gift to receive that. But like, yeah, like that was crazy. I didn't. I knew I wanted graphics at some point, but like again, just the fact that I didn't have to do it was very nice because I'm not a graphic designer and in any stretch of the imagination, But to have people in my life who decided to lend their services to me was very kind, and I'm very very thankful for that. And then you go on to week 3, and by week 3, just one episode later, I had a friend of mine named Francisco, who you might know as Sojourn One, because he makes music. Shout out him. That's my boy. He made me intro music for the podcast. The intro music that I still use to this day. To this day, it's his. And again, I have not remixed it. I have not asked for additional stuff. Like, you know, he provided his talents and his artistic stamp on this. And like again, just to have that groundswell support again was really unexpected, and like I'm just so thankful for his consistent and persistent support of the podcast. I mean, he was truly a day one subscriber. He's been commenting on all the episodes. I know he watches them. He's always talking to me about it. And like, you know, as our personal friendship has developed, our creative ambitions have as well. And like, now we make music together under the name Tugo, which is like, I mean, technically like we're like in a band. Like, I never thought I'd do that. And like, that music is now getting released through this very podcast as well, which is like kind of crazy. The fact that like a podcast channel is like also home to some music, but like, I'll talk more about that as I kind of go on throughout the timeline here of the podcast. But like, so after week 3, after I now have an intro graphic made by Sarah and I have intro music made by Francisco, I go on to week 4, and this was the first one where I kind of thought, okay, I might have honestly just broken into something here. Like I kind of just broke a type of like glass ceiling or kind of barrier, because episode number 4 was where I debated root beer flavors. I debated Mugs versus Barks versus A&W. And though this one does not have the most views of the podcast, like in its history, and whatnot, this is the one that I think has sparked the most conversation, because this was the one where people afterwards, after it went up and after they listened, they were texting me about it. And they were also talking to me literally in public on the street. Like, I listened to your podcast, your stupid root beer debate. How could you? Barks is terrible. A&W is number 1. Mug, how could you? And there were people talking about it to me like as like an actual thing of conversation, as an actual discussion point. And I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, now it's kind of breaking into something. It doesn't just exist online, it exists in real, dialogue. And my friends were appalled. They were beside themselves that I did not take into consideration 1919 root beer when I did my root beer debate. But I mean this sincerely. The whole reason why I even did this as a bit on the episode was because the image I found talked about debate between those 3 flavors, Mugs and Barks and A&W. If 1919 was in the image, I would have included it. But just because, again, I literally found the image online and it contained these 3, that's why I went with that as the debate, as the episode, and look, like that in of itself was kind of a tough hill to climb, because you're listening to me drink root beer and then talk about it. Like, that's not compelling radio, like the sound of a man drinking something on a microphone. That's not a very appealing thing to listen to. But people did, and they wanted to talk about it, and they wanted to tell me their opinions and tell me their opinions on my opinions. And I was like, again, to have that kind of discussion and debate exist uh, as a result of my rinky dink podcast, I was like, okay, here we go. Here we go. And yeah, it just, that was a really cool moment for me to kind of see that naturally happen. And if you haven't if you can't tell by now, kids, I am recording this in chunks, so to speak, just because I'm looking back through the catalog of the Far Out podcast, going week by week here, and I'm dissecting things and I'm finding things out. And the next thing that happened, and again, this is all following pretty sequentially, you know, with the podcast and just how it goes week to week and whatnot. Like by week 5. I kind of fell into a pretty steady rhythm with it, at least in terms of what I wanted to talk about. Because, like, you go on to week 5, and there's a bit of everything in there. Like, I talk about the Twins, the Minnesota Twins, and how Max Kepler left the team. Shout out Max Kepler. That's my boy. Like, that's my boy. That he made me a fan of that team. And like it serves as a time capsule as well, just for things that I like. Because like I talk about the Twins to this day, and so like yeah, to have him leave, that was tough. But like I also talk about Star Trek and the Vikings and whatnot, and I also talk about a TV show called The Agency, which I think is amazing. And that I covered that week to week, episode to episode. Like The Agency gave me kind of a persistent talking point, and that thing is an incredible series on Paramount Plus, Paramount Plus. If you have not watched it, do yourself a favor. If you're a fan of military thriller TV, espionage-based TV, dramas, it's phenomenal, front to back. I just think it's great. It only has one season right now, but it's it's new. And a second season is coming, and at some point I do intend to do a rewatch of that. So I really do recommend that you check that out because I think that's pretty great. On the flip side, a TV show called Creature Commandos started, which started out the newest installment of DC storytelling because we have the Marvel side of comics and storytelling with their superheroes, Captain America, Iron Man, Spider-Man, so on and so forth. Then you have the DC side with Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and Marvel, of course, has made the jump from page to screen, and they make all these great movies, and it's awesome. People love them, and DC has done that to some success, but not persistent, consistent success. And so they wanted to kind of do a clean slate and start over and start fresh with a new idea, and in comes James Gunn, and like the birth of the DCU, the new slate of movies and TV shows, like that was really truly meat for me to talk about on the podcast consistently, because that's when Creature Commandos, the TV show, started, and like that was also something I covered week to week, episode to episode. I ended up not liking that show. I can't recommend that, but like as the Far Out podcast was starting, so too was this entire new branch of superhero storytelling, and that's something I'm really passionate about because like I not only love superheroes, like I'm a big fan of that stuff, and like I still play the games and I still watch the movies, and I've even read literal comic books. Like I have comics in my apartment right now, and like my mom and I would go to the movies together all the time. Shout out my mom, and like we love going to superhero stuff, and so like again, I've said this before, but like the idea of getting a whole new pantheon of superhero storytelling to go and watch with my mom, like that's just a gift that keeps on giving. And so I was really in on the DC storytelling slate getting off on the right foot, and it did, and with Creature Commandos in comes Superman, and Superman specifically as a topic was just an artery for this podcast. I talked about every poster, every trailer, pictures, you name it. I was, because again, as I just said, I was so in on DC beginning their new slate of movies and TV shows. I wanted it to succeed so bad, and I found it so interesting that it just gave me something to constantly talk about. And so, though I was technically late to the podcast world, I came in at a really opportune time where there were some great TV and some great movies starting, and like the Vikings were hot with Sam Darnold, and like we hadn't had a new QB yet, and I'll get to that too at some point, but like there was just this constant collection of things that I wanted to talk about that continued to evolve, and it really, really worked out. And like, yeah, getting to refer back to the Superman movie and to the DC slate has been not only a lot of fun for me, but also just, again, really rewarding in terms of content, which is such an ugly word nowadays. But it's the truth, If I ever ran out of things to talk about, I knew I could talk about DC stuff. So like, yeah, it's really funny how things worked out with the growth of the podcast. Also with the podcast, like I've had kind of an interesting relationship with the podcast as well too, because I don't always refer to it as a true podcast, because like I describe it as a glorified YouTube video, and I mean that both as a joke and sincerely, because like the podcast isn't anywhere else except YouTube. It's not on Spotify, it's not on Apple Music, it's just YouTube. Well, YouTube is for videos, and like, yeah, podcasts go up on YouTube as well. Again, look at Joe Rogan, but like, like for me, I think of podcasts purely in audio format. It's just radio. There's nothing else to it, And so for me to have this in video form is interesting, but it also that enables me to do other things, because like YouTube is a very interesting platform, because anyone can have a YouTube channel, and everyone and their mother has watched YouTube at some point. I mean, I would bet that most people watch YouTube more than they watch actual TV or movies. Like, and I'm in that camp too. Like, I watch so much stuff on YouTube, from reviews of things to breakdowns to informative things to silly things. Like, YouTube is kind of honestly a hub. It's a nexus point of entertainment, and so for me to go into that, like it makes sense. Like if the podcast existed on Spotify and iTunes, it would also exist on YouTube as well. But like the idea that like it's just solely on YouTube has always been kind of like an interesting thing to me, because like in my opinion, that's not the typical format for a quote podcast, But I digress. But like, as I get into more, as I continue with the podcast, and again, as I'm relying on YouTube as a way to do this, like YouTube, once you become a creator on YouTube and not just a viewer, like the curtain gets pulled back. Like YouTube is incredibly deep. Like, I mean, and again, this is depending on how much information you as a viewer are willing to share when you make your account. But like, if you make your YouTube account and you're like, I'm a 20-something dude who lives in, the Midwest and yada yada, that information can get reflected back onto, the people that you watch stuff from. So like, when I look back at my analytics for the podcast, for the Far Out podcast, I can break things down incredibly deep. Like I can figure out demographics of viewers. I can figure out when people click, how long do they watch? What are my primary hubs for viewership? Like, is it rural, urban, the US, other places across the globe? How long do people watch? What's the demographic? Primarily, is it male to female, old to young? I mean, YouTube gives you a lot of information, and it's been interesting to check that out. Funny enough, the majority of my viewership is in the U.S. It's not all of it. It's not all of it. I think I haven't actually crunched the literal numbers, but the last time I did kind of that tertiary look at it, it was about 70%. 70% was about the number that was in the U.S., meaning that there are people outside the U.S. who are watching my stuff, which I find really interesting. One of the places that did get roughly about 5 to 10% consistently in the first couple of weeks was India, which I find to be interesting. That some persistent amount of viewers again are not only abroad, but they're specifically kind of in a different hub, which again is India. So shout out to my audience over there and whatnot. What's also funny too is that YouTube is also incredibly touchy and finicky, and they have a very specific way of doing things. And if you go outside that system, they will let you know, and they will treat you like they are the freaking mafia coming after you. YouTube and copyright and disclaimers is an absolute nightmare. And like, I've done album reviews on this podcast. I've reviewed Logic, Katy Perry, so on and so forth. Uploading stuff to YouTube that is not your own, you are playing with fire and you are flipping a coin if it's going to work or not. I've had episodes of the podcast flagged. I've had notices saying this is fine, but it might get taken down. The reason why is because you're uploading music. And like, there's this whole thing about like, well, I'm doing it under fair use. You know, like when I recorded the episode where I talked about the breakdown of Logic's Aquarius 3 album, or technically EP, I guess, you know, I included audio of the actual song because, you know, I wanted that reference point for the viewers, you know. And also other people have also recorded album reviews too, like people that, you know, do a first reaction when, you know, Drake drops something, so on and so forth. But I don't know how that kind of system works because, like, it seems to work for other people, yet for myself it's incredibly touchy because like again, like YouTube gives me information and it's like, look, you're technically uploading stuff that isn't yours. It's fine, but you should keep it to a minimum. And it's like, well, I want to record episodes that cover lots of different artists. I want to talk about Logic and 21 Pilots and stuff like that. And like, it's been really interesting and frankly, honestly, frustrating to navigate YouTube's system and whatnot because there have been episodes that have gotten flagged saying we might take it down, we might not. I've had email correspondence with YouTube talking about why I think they should leave me alone. And you know, getting back to the talk about demographics and the geography of my listenership. There are some episodes of the podcast that are unviewable in other countries. The most persistent one that I think 3 or 4 episodes of the podcast you cannot find on the standard search engine for YouTube is in Russia. Some of my episodes of the podcast got completely black flagged in Russia. And so unless you have some workaround, if you're in Russia and you have some VPN, you're not going to be able to find episodes of the podcast. I don't know if they can still listen to other episodes. I don't know if I'm completely black flagged. But again, YouTube gives you that info and it says your primary listenership is in the US. Some of it's also in India. You have other spots as well that account for 1 to 2%, but you part of your catalog is not viewable in Russia. And it tells me. And it doesn't get specific as to why. It doesn't say like, you know, the content was deemed by the government to be inappropriate. It doesn't say anything like, you know, yada yada. It just says content. It gives me some notice like content will not be searchable in this country. Do you still want to upload? And I'm like, yeah, okay, sure. So it's just really interesting seeing how that works. You know, and I still don't fully know how YouTube does it because, you know, if you've listened or watched the podcast over the course of its lifetime, I've stopped including clips of movies, outright music, so on and so forth, because I don't want to navigate that minefield. And it truly is a minefield. And I'll share an example of like where I accidentally stepped on a mine and it was not good. You go on. What I was referencing there from doing album reviews with Logic was week 9. and talking about, evaluating my listenership. I go on now to week 10, just 1 week later. And what's interesting too is that, like, over the course of the lifetime of this podcast, a new president came in to the White House. Like, Trump got reelected. So naturally, I talked about that. One person in particular who covers politics with, I think, a very deft and honest hand, and I really enjoy his commentary, though I disagree with him on several things, is Bill Maher. I think Bill Maher is amazing. I think he is truly a professional at the craft. I think he is a voice that should be bigger. So if you have not listened to him, if you have not watched his show or listened to his podcast or read his books, get on him, because like this guy is amazing. In a world of politics that are increasingly divided so sharply between red and blue voices, Bill Maher is someone who I truly think is more of a purple voice. He definitely leans blue on a lot of things, but and I think at the end of the day he is absolutely, a Democrat and whatnot. But he there's something about the way he conducts himself in every bit of output that he has, every product that he has with his name on it, that, again, for myself, speaking honestly and truthfully, I'm a Christian, I'm a conservative. Despite him being a rather more blue, primarily blue voice, he's able to build bridges. And I find his commentary refreshing, even when it goes against my own opinions, when it makes fun of conservatives. And Bill Maher is also a stone cold atheist. Like he actively mocks Christianity and religion, calls it stupid, calls it a myth, so on and so forth. And look, that's another thing too about the podcast as well. Like, just getting away from me talking about movies and TV. Like, I also talk about really serious things like podcasts, like politics and religion and so on and so forth. And like, I want to use this podcast, I want to use this platform for not only a source of entertainment, but also education. And with that, I feel does come a responsibility to do evangelism on my part, to talk about, the Lord and Scripture and so on and so forth. And I do it from a place of just being honest with myself and with you guys as well, but also, like, if I find something genuinely interesting, I want to talk about it. And I find Scripture to be genuinely interesting, and I find it to be incredibly refreshing for my life as well. And I want to try to share that with people, to open that door for others as well, so that they can be curious. And Bill Maher is someone who is like, screw that. I don't want that. That's stupid. That's dumb. So on and so forth. And so, like, again, for me to hear that, you would think I would run in the opposite direction. I would say I don't want to listen to him. I don't want to be near him because he's black and I'm white. I'm red. He's blue. But I tell you what, people, like, kids, trust me, for whatever my opinion is worth, hear it now and listen to it now. Bill Maher is a purple voice. He brings a lot to the table, a lot of great discussion, a lot of great nuance, and I think he's incredible, and that you should listen to him. The whole point about why I'm giving him a tongue bath is because in me developing the podcast, again, as I started to include clips of things, and so, if I talk about a movie, I want to include a movie clip to provide proper context and entertainment. YouTube doesn't like that. So when I was talking about Bill Maher and his show Real Time, I included clips from his show, his HBO show, which belongs to Warner Brothers. I included clips, 3 different clips I included in episode 10 of the Far Out podcast. And I uploaded that, and it passed through the first wave of censors, and I went, okay, job well done. It's out there. Hope it's a hit. I wake up the next day, and YouTube is at my door with weapons drawn, and they're like, you're toast, or you're gonna be toast. Here's why. YouTube gave me very strict copyright warnings about my inclusion of clips of Bill Maher's show Real Time, because that's a Warner Brothers owned and produced product that's via HBO Max and stuff like that. And they did not want clips of their show included in someone else's upload. you know, and whatnot. And they said, YouTube told me that there is the potential that each inclusion of the clips will result in a strike. And if you know anything about YouTube, YouTube follows the mantra set by baseball: 3 strikes and you're out. If you get 3 copyright strikes on your YouTube account, you are done. It is gone. It is deleted. It doesn't matter if you have 10 subscribers, 10 million, you've been on YouTube for 1 year, 10 years, doesn't matter. If you get 3 strikes, you're out. Now, I don't know if there's some Gucci super appeal process that like a Mr. Beast could do. Like, I'm sure that there are exceptions, but YouTube told me, and you can read it in its user agreement, that you get 3 strikes, you're out. And it's like, you can't just make a new account. We're going to flag the account. We're going to flag the email. We're going to make it hard for you to exist on YouTube because we have a very strict policy when it comes to copyright strikes. YouTube told me that I had 3 strikes under review regarding Bill Maher and my inclusion of his show Real Time. So I'm 10 weeks in, 2 months into the podcast, and YouTube nearly kills it completely. I'm not saying I ended it. I'm not saying I went on a hiatus. Well, funny enough, actually, when this was happening, and I was emailing YouTube, I did release a very quick, brief statement. I don't know if anybody saw it, but I did say I'm going on a hiatus because at that point I did try to make the podcast week to week to establish some consistency with uploads. With this, I thought I was completely torpedoed. I was essentially in YouTube jail, and I said I'm going on hiatus because I thought there's a chance here that the Far Out podcast could go away. I removed that. I think I put that out via tweet and some other stuff. I think I texted some people, but I kind of immediately retracted that because I wasn't sure what the process would be. Well, anyway, I was emailing YouTube, and I was speaking to them as if I was a lawyer speaking on the behalf of a defendant. Like, I wrote emails like college papers where I was like, I meant no disrespect to anyone in Bill Maher's camp or the Warner Brothers conglomerate. This was, if you look, this is clearly under the use of fair use, subsection blah, blah, blah. I in no way meant infringement. And if you'd like to review the process in which I collected these clips, I got it via other open source channels as well. This was not pirated. Like, I was pleading my case to YouTube and Warner Brothers, to Warner Media, saying this is under fair use. I'm not even doing it for the sake of criticism. I'm doing it for the sake of, support. I'm saying you should listen to Bill Maher. Here's why. Check out his show. And I ended up emailing, like I said, YouTube. I was emailing Warner Brothers. I mean, in HBO. Like, it kept going up the chain. I was on the phone with people at HBO, not like producers. I'm sure it was like, assistants to the assistant to the assistant. But I was on the phone with people via HBO. And I was saying, what does this kind of look like? They were talking about, HBO Max and, how we don't like this and how you have to get proper approval and stuff like that. Because, it's not like they reached out to me. There was a help number attached to the email. And so I called it, and they said, hey, look, we have kind of like this pamphlet we read to people who call about this. Like, we're not really involved with YouTube, but like, these are our guidelines and we don't change them for anyone. I said, okay, and so, yeah, it was funny. The more I talked about Bill Maher, the closer I kind of got to him, kind of sort of in a roundabout way. But then they were like, stop it or we're going to kill you. I kid, but you know what I mean? But yeah, it ended up, YouTube got back to me and they said that YouTube and Warner Media are upholding their claims regarding your inclusion of the clips. We don't care that you're doing under quote free use. What you have to do is you either have to release an entirely new edit of the episode where you don't have the clips, or you outright delete them, or you outright delete the episode entirely, or if you leave it up, it will go through another review process, at which point then you could be found liable for the inclusion of the clips, and each one will get you a strike because there are 3 clips, 3 strikes and you're out. And so if you go back and you listen to episode 10 of the podcast, in the first couple minutes of that episode, I give a clarification saying this was edited and re-edited so many different times. This is not the original recording, so on and so forth. And I give kind of a breakdown of that. But this is meant to be more of an in-depth breakdown of what went down with how YouTube works. And so if you go back and you listen to episode 10, you will find links to the clips that I used from Bill Maher's show, but you will not find the actual clips in the episode themselves. You will just find attachments to them in the description. Because, YouTube and Warner Brothers and HBO, they all let me know that they're very, very protective of other people using their stuff. And hey, look, I get that from a sense of ownership and protection. But, man, again, to be 10 weeks and to be 2 months in, and to receive those emails and to be on the phone the way that I was, it was not fun. I thought I was going to lose my channel and my access to YouTube entirely. But yeah, it ended up working out fine, and then you go on to week number 11, and this featured my very first guest, where I talked about Catholicism with my friend named Adam. And that was really interesting too, because I knew I wanted guests on the podcast in some capacity at some point, but you know, like I didn't know who I'd be able to get on the podcast. I didn't know if I'd want my friends on, because look, I love my friends. I love talking to my friends, but I was worried that if I had them on the podcast, it would just result in a giggling session, we're just talking about inside jokes. I wasn't sure it was going to make for a good episode, and it's not like I can just call up, you know, freaking Mark Hamill and say hey, Mr. Skywalker, want to come on the podcast and talk about Star Wars? It's I can't just do that, so it's I knew I wanted to have people on, but I wasn't sure who they were going to be, when, how that was going to work, if I was going to have to constantly go to them, if they were going to come to me, if we were going to do it via Zoom, or whatnot. And then my friend Adam reached out, and he just said, hey, I would love to be a guest. And I was like, great. And so it went the route of friendship, and he was a great guest because I'm not a Catholic, I'm a Christian, I'm devoted to Christ, but I don't belong to that religious sect, and for him to come on and to give very in-depth and passionate breakdown of his faith, I thought was a really rich conversation just between us, and to have that captured and put up onto the podcast, I found to be really, really rewarding. And that was a great encapsulation of what I want the podcast to be. In the same way as how the root beer conversation broke through and got people talking outside of the internet, that episode 11 with Adam, that opened the floodgates to having guests, to having discussions of great depth and magnitude. And I was very, very thankful for not only his vulnerability with myself and with the matters of his heart, but also just in literally reaching out to me. I did not reach out to him. He volunteered his time and his home to me because we recorded at his place, and I was very happy to have him included, and for him to be my first guest meant a lot to me. And and so having guests became not routine. It's not like Joe Rogan where he has a guest every week. Maybe at some point I'll get there, but that opened doors to having that as an option for me, and so I was very thankful to just begin that, and people responded to that very warmly as well, and so it all just kept clicking. You know what I mean? After, of course, the scare with the copyright, but it's funny how that worked out. Now let's jump ahead a bit. You go on to week 20 of the podcast, episode 20. And I guess technically not week. I took some time in between. You know what I mean, though. Episode 20 of the podcast. So when I started the podcast, I held that I did not want there to be cameras with this. I did not want this to be a visual podcast. I wanted it to be audio only, which again, kind of YouTube kind of gets in the way of that because I started to include pictures and videos and so on and so forth. And so there is some component of this that is visual, which, is nice and whatnot. But I did not want cameras. I did not want people on cameras because, one, that's an entirely different system to rig up. Working with mics alone has been, turbulent enough. You add on cameras to that, goodness. But yeah, what's interesting though is that I also did that not only for the simplicity of it, but also with my guests. I did not want them to worry about their appearance as well. I did not want them to think, yeah, I'd love to come on, but that means I'd have to dress nice and whatnot. And so I just removed that from the equation entirely. And also, just with radio as a medium, I love listening to radio and I love listening to people just through their voice because, like, when you listen to someone enough, you drop a mental image of them. And for myself, I'll listen to podcasts who I've never seen the people of. Then I finally see a picture of them, and I'm like, they don't look anyway the way I made them out to be, based off their voice. Like I can listen to someone and I think, oh yeah, this guy's mid-30s, short black hair, wears glasses, and then you find a picture of the guy, and it's like, oh, he's actually 7 feet tall, blonde, and whatever. And it's like, so I loved the idea of that anonymity to it all, if that's the right word. I love the idea of being kind of anonymous with it, where it's just my voice, and people could draw whatever image of me they wanted. If they wanted to think I was tall, short, big, small, doesn't matter. Now, look, if you did enough internet research, you could find my Twitter handle, you could find my Instagram. People know what I look like. I'm not hiding my appearance, but I wasn't outright sharing it either, just because, again, I liked that kind of separation that radio provided, because there's no cameras and whatnot. Well, in episode 20, I met an actor. I met C. Thomas Howell, and I took a picture with him, and I threw the picture up, so I fully revealed myself to the podcast world and whatnot, and okay, I guess my face is out there and whatnot. Looking back though, that was recorded in April. Boy, I had really long hair back then, really, really long, and I didn't have any facial hair either. I looked like an infant. Goodness. Look, I by no means am grizzled now, but I have a mustache and a bit of a beard going on here. Back then, I was clean shaven. I was smooth. All the hair on my body went to my head, and boy, I had a long hair. I still have kind of long hair now, but back then it was really long, And here's this picture of C. Thomas Howell, and look, I love movies. I love the entertainment business. It's why I make it a consistent talking point about, for the podcast and whatnot, why I get so deep in on a movie. And so to literally meet an actor, that was a true, genuine dream come true. And The Outsiders is my favorite book, minus the Bible. It's, so The Outsiders is my favorite fiction book. The Bible is my favorite nonfiction book. C. Thomas Howell is an actor in that movie, so he brought my favorite book to life on the silver screen. He's also done voice work for DC. He's been in some DC animated movies. He's been on TV as well. This guy is a true workhorse actor. And so again, to meet someone who literally went behind the camera to bring various stories and various characters to life was a dream come true. And to get him to come to my home college town of Mayville, and Mayville is not big. Mayville is a dot on a dot, and so the fact that he came out to my small town on this kind of tour circuit where he was touring with the movie and answering questions, doing Q&As and all that stuff, it was a true, genuine dream come true. And just the fact that, again, I got to meet him and see the movie and watch it with him and get to talk to him, and he remembered my name, and I just, the fact that happened, the fact that I got to catalog it through the podcast, the podcast does serve as a bit of a time capsule. It is interesting, though I've only been doing this for a year. Just looking back on the previous year, it's pretty nuts. But yeah, look, Mr. Howell, Mr. C. Thomas Howell, if you're listening, and I know that you are, if you want to come on the podcast, just reach out and I'll happily sit down with you. Heck, I'll come to you. Where do you live? California? I'll be there overnight. Not even a problem. We'll talk about anything you want. Because he's a true, genuine talent. He's made movies, TV. He also makes music as well. And yeah, just it was really, truly awesome to get to meet him and to be in his embrace and to talk about the business and to just say I got to meet an actor. And again, he was just so friendly. And yeah, to have that interaction be a part of the podcast, to be a part of the history of the Far Out podcast. I'm just very thankful. So thank you, Mr. Howell, for coming out, and I hope you'll consider doing more stuff like that in the future. You go on now to episode 24 of the podcast. This one is titled Welcome to the Planet. And for me, this one is really special, and it's the first of its kind. Not the only one. I have more like it planned, but yeah, episode 24, Welcome to the Planet, is not so much a movie review or overview or just kind of me sharing my thoughts on a film. This is what I consider to be a film analysis, and this has to do with the Superman movie called Man of Steel. This is the solo Superman pick that is led by Henry Cavill. And the reason why I wanted to do this was because Henry Cavill was the previous iteration of the character of Superman prior to us getting the newest version of the character led by David Cornsweet in his solo movie that, relaunched the DC storytelling umbrella with the new DCU. And so, like I said, you know, with the new Superman movie coming out earlier this year, I was all in on that movie, all in on the idea of that launching a new universe of storytelling, potential. So I wanted to go back and I wanted to look at what was, what could have been, what remains, and see how I could break that film down more kind of concisely. And, I remember when I saw that movie for the first time. It was in 2013. I was with my best friends in the whole wide world. And I really liked that movie then, and I really like it now. For me, it's held up. It has aged gracefully. It's a very mature and sophisticated superhero movie that has some pretty big themes, and I think kind of handles it all with a deft hand. And on top of that, the soundtrack is amazing and the action is great. But this came in the aftermath of the Dark Knight trilogy, which is shepherded by Christopher Nolan. Some people argue that is the best representation of superheroes on screen, and that also contains the best Batman, played by Christian Bale. I will absolutely hear both of those arguments because those movies are incredible. And so this new version of Superman, this Man of Steel movie, tried to very much chase that success set by Nolan and company. And so in that kind of development, going away from the previous model of Superman movies to now something more mature, I wanted to catalog its development from kind of the inception point of how it began. There's a pun for you, to its completion and then release. And in doing that, I researched the film a lot. I read interviews with people that worked on the movie. Like I said, I cataloged its creation, and I got to watch the movie several times throughout that process, just because I wanted to have a good understanding of what I wanted to talk about. But what's interesting is that the finished product is not what I initially intended, because if you watch the episode, it's very much shot like a documentary where I do overview and I give almost like a, a plot point by plot point breakdown of the movie. I really kind of go beat by beat with the story, which is not what I intended to do. I intended to give kind of this large scale overview. It turns out I really got detailed in the overview. But if you also listen to that, whereas right now I'm just kind of going off the dome here and I'm stuttering and tripping over my own words and stuff like that. With that episode in particular, that was not free form at all. In fact, I wrote a literal script for that because, again, I wrote so many notes about the movie, about pre-production, post-production, release. What do I think about it? Yada yada. That I didn't want to forget anything. I didn't want to just go at it just with a hope and a prayer. I wanted it to be very controlled. And so I wrote a script, which ended up, I think, being 10 pages. And I did multiple takes trying to get my voice down, my cadence down. And then Like I mentioned earlier, YouTube doesn't like it when you upload, other people's stuff, whether it's movie clips, music, TV, so on and so forth. And on top of that, this is a Warner Brothers released movie. And as I said previously, I had some correspondence with Warner Brothers talking about Bill Maher. And so the last thing I wanted to do was be under their gun again, under the gun of YouTube and Warner Brothers. But I did include clips and stuff like that of the movie purely in a visual format. I think I stripped all the audio out of it. But if you watch that episode, if you actually watch it as opposed to listen to it, what you'll see is that there is a filter over the clips, and so it all kind of has this tint to it. And YouTube was very, very touchy about it. I went through many edits of this episode, because essentially YouTube said we'll let you include the clips, but you have to watermark it. But they never said what does that look like. So could it be a watermark in the right hand corner, the left hand corner, the center, the bottom, the top, And so I went through all those different passes, and then they're like, no, you need a little more. Well, then I would bump it up, and so I bump up the opacity or take it down, whatever the correct terminology is. Essentially, this sticker that I had on the screen, at one point it was see-through, and then I thought, okay, what if I make it less see-through? Then what if I make it solid? And so I was going through many different logo locations, many different logo tints, I guess you could call it. And then at one point I did like a chessboard type grid. And I was just going through these things trying to, this is going to sound so pretentious, but I was trying to preserve the integrity of the literal film that I was putting on screen. I didn't want it to be completely obstructed. It ended up being quite obstructed in the finished product. But the thing that you saw, or the thing that you see now when you click on that episode 24, where it has kind of that full screen tint to it, that was what YouTube deemed good and appropriate, and it passed through its censors and all that stuff. And so I said, fine, I'm not gonna fight you again on this. But yeah, I went through numerous takes, or numerous edits. I mean, excuse me, of that episode. I think it was easily over 10, maybe over 15. I'm not fully sure by the time it got to be released. But there are some movies that I really, really like, and I won't do that kind of breakdown for every movie I enjoy, because that would be, I would have to literally hire a crew of people to do that. But like for movies that I find to be really impactful in my life, I will dedicate an episode to a much more detailed breakdown of. And I have ideas. I have a short list of movies I would do that with, and I have ideas about how I would do them. But I gotta tell you what, that project in particular, Welcome to the Planet, was very, very time consuming. Again, I'm not complaining. It's a labor of love. I did it, and everything like that. But it took a lot longer. Like I said, it required a lot more writing, a lot more thinking, a lot more planning for the execution. And so cranking out one of those is not possible. That might be something I do maybe once or twice a year. Well, we'll see. When I get better at this stuff, we'll see what happens. But I do have a short list of movies I want to give that treatment for. And so I hope that in the future, not only do I manage to cover your favorite movie in that capacity, I hope that, there's some connection there, but also, if I cover a movie in that level of analysis, that you'll check it out. And, even if you don't know the movie itself, that maybe that'll be that kind of gateway to that film, because that's what I want those kind of analysis videos to do. If that analysis video can lead people to watch Man of Steel, then my job is complete. And then, if I do that for another movie, if that leads you to revisit a film or to check it out for the first time, then I will feel incredibly satisfied by that. But yeah, I enjoyed making that in-depth video of Man of Steel, but it does take some time. So when those come out, it'll be for a movie that I feel really impacted me, or just kind of culture in general, or both, to be honest. And one other movie that had a big impact on me, especially when it comes in terms of the podcast, is the Mission Impossible franchise, and specifically the lead up to Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, which is dubbed as the last movie, the conclusion to that franchise. And what's interesting is that that movie in particular, led by Tom Cruise, the Mission Impossible franchise is great. It's big, it's grand, has a lot of fans, makes a lot of money. This movie in particular, the last one in the franchise, it did well, but not like great in terms of Hollywood. Like the new Superman movie made more money than it, which is crazy. But what's interesting is my relationship to that movie and to the podcast, because as I was getting closer to that movie releasing, I was doing a rewatch of the series of Mission Impossible films, and I was recording my reviews of those movies over the course of just me watching them. So if I watch one on Monday, I'd record the review on Monday. If I watch another one on Wednesday, I'd record on Wednesday, so on and so forth. And finally, I collected all the reviews, including the newest one, and I put it into an episode of the podcast. Funny enough, despite that movie not being my favorite of the year, despite it not being a real moneymaker overall, and despite the Mission Impossible franchise not being, on the level of like a Star Wars or a Marvel type thing, the episode of the podcast that covered Mission Impossible is my biggest one in terms of views. As I said, the root beer one is my most successful one in that it transcended the conversation, leapt from internet to real world. But the Mission Impossible episode has over 330 views, which is nuts. Like, again, like that movie, I was all in on Superman. I couldn't wait for that. I was excited for Mission Possible, but like I wasn't chomping at the bit, and anything like that. And so for that one to come out and just to make a splash, to make the splash that it did, was really unexpected. And so, I mean, not only thank you for listening to that and watching that, but also for sharing it, because like clearly that thing got some circulation beyond what I intended to. But like, yeah, who else but Tom Cruise to lead me to a path of success? But yeah, the Mission Impossible episode of the Far Out podcast is the biggest one right now in terms of views at over 330. And look, if that's the biggest the podcast will ever get, if I'll never surpass that, then great. Thank you, Mr. Cruise, for helping me out. But yeah, just really interesting to see that one in particular struck a chord with people. So again, thank you for watching, for listening, and for sharing, because I couldn't have done that without you. You go forward now some more. You get past episode 34, and I did a couple of uploads that are different from any other upload on the Far Out podcast, different from a standard episode to a film analysis video to a guest spot, because these two uploads that happened had to do with music that me and my friend Francisco Sojourn One, the previously mentioned Sojourn One, music that we made together under our group name, our band name, as it were, called To Go. And yeah, look, with that, as I've said on the podcast previously, and I really debated on doing this just because I was honestly nervous about it, but like I'm a writer. I love to write. I write things from shopping lists to my hopes and dreams to stories. I try to be a storyteller. I'm an aspiring author. I have a book that's, quote, finished, but it's not published yet. I'm working on getting it literally on the shelves. But as as that book is done, I still have a desire to write in whatever capacity that looks like. And so as I was writing one day, I realized that what I was putting on the page wasn't going to fit in like a poem. It wasn't going to fit in a story. And I thought the best way I could, quote, make it real, give it life, was to put music behind it, to make it into a song. And I'm not musically inclined. I was a percussionist in high school and in college. I say was a drummer. Now I'm kind of more back into it. But at that point, I was out of practice for years. But my friend Francisco, again, he makes music under his own name called Sojourn One, and his music is the bomb diggity. Like, he makes amazing stuff. And so I reached out to him and I said, could we do some kind of collab? And I was very forthright. I said, look, man, I was like, I'm a writer. What I'm going to bring to the table, to the creative table, is the words, it's the tone, it's the emotion behind it. Essentially, I'm going to need you to do the legwork when it comes to providing the sound and stuff like that. And it ended up being, I had more to do with it than I initially thought I would. I honestly thought I kind of would just give him the materials and say, take your best shot at it. But No, he is the workhorse behind the project. He really is, and I'm not doing this just to blow him up, but like, I mean, sincerely, he's a really amazing instrumentalist. He knows guitar. He understands mixing. Like the mix that you hear of the tracks are done by him. I mean, he speaks about music production as if it were like a foreign language to me, and so I'm just kind of trying to learn at you know at his pace and try to figure stuff out. And he has taught me a lot, but really, just him taking the project under his own wing and shepherding it forward, and me being able to help however I can, has been really nice. And with Tugo, with the EP that we dropped, um, again, when we did that, uh, well, first of all, the production side of music is nuts because you can literally harp over like your breathing and stuff like that. Not that we harped on each other, but like once you actually get in the trenches, you see how many details and how many pieces go into making literally one song. So for us to make those two songs, it took us about 2 or 3 months, I think, and that's because, we had to get the drums, the guitar, the lyrics, the whatever. Then we find out, oh, we need, that one take on the drums, it didn't sound right. It was off by a literal note. Go back and do it again. Oh, this mix didn't work. It doesn't sound right. Go back and do it again. So there was a lot of trial and error with that. But like, I remember when we released it, when it was finally ready to be shared, we did the blitzkrieg that I did when I first started the podcast, is that we converted it all into links and then we texted it to like everyone we know, and because of that, it was a great success. It got a bunch of views, got a really warm reception and response, and people were very surprised to know that we were doing this, and they really seemed to like it and whatnot. And it's funny because every kid growing up has dreams of doing something like that. Every kid says, I want to be an actor. I want to be I want to be a superstar. I want to be in a band. I want to be the new Justin Bieber. But rarely do people follow through on that. And that's for several reasons. I'm not gonna, say like, you gave up on yourself. No, I understand. Like life happens. Life gets in the way. But for those that choose to pursue it, to really put their passion into something, uh, just know that anyone can do this, even if you're not quote musically inclined. But if you happen to find someone or some people who share your vision and share your passion and appreciate you like Sojourn One did with myself, then you can come together as a team, as a unit, and you can make great things. And so for us to come together and for us to make two go and to release music that we're both proud of, that tells stories and hopefully, also just sounds good at the end of the day, that for us is incredibly rewarding because this point, I remember Sojourn said to me, because we were talking about the creative process behind just everything, podcasting, writing, music production, and I remember I was getting frustrated with some aspect of it, and he told me, he's like, don't let this be work. You know, we don't do it for the work. We do it because we want to do it. That's the whole reason. And he's right, and he's right. Like, the thing about the podcast and about the music is like, and I mean this sincerely. Same with my book idea too. Like, I didn't start any of this to make money. I mean that sincerely. I'm truly in it just to do it. If I happen to make money on the side and get some quote notoriety off it, well, that's just frosting on the cake. But like, I have a day job. I have other things I want to do and other things I do, and stuff like that. And so the podcast and the books and the music, it's all just a labor of love. It's all just a hobby at the end of the day. And so for him to bring me back down to earth and to say like, look, we're doing this because we enjoy it. So make sure you enjoy it too. I was like, dang, you're right. And so again, I hope that that's reflected in the finished product. And yeah, again, thank you to everyone for the reception for Tugo. It was really overwhelming, in the best way possible. And if you like what we did previously, know that we have more ideas. I'm always writing, and he's always working on something, whether it's a beat or a composition. Just we have irons in the fire. We do, and whatever that looks like, who knows where those roads will take us. But we intend to make more music, and then Sojourn One, when he's not working on Two Go, he's making his own stuff, which is amazing. And I just hope you consider checking out his stuff as well. But yeah, the idea that music would be released under a podcast feed is kind of ridiculous. But hey, it worked out, and I'm very thankful that it made the splash that it did. And then we followed that up with a kind of a behind the scenes making of documentary, which can be found on the Far Out podcast feed as well. And that was really fun because, again, we captured just B-roll behind the scenes stuff of us making the music. And so if you like the songs, if you like what we did, and if you want to know more about our creative process, then there you go. And then you go on now to episode number 40 of the podcast. And this one will hopefully be the first and last of its kind. This episode is over 7 hours long. It's over 7.5 hours long. And that's because, as I say in that episode, it was a kind of a cleaning house type thing. I was just getting out all this stuff because I had fallen behind on things I wanted to talk about, and that was due to, like I said, life, the job, and then also just other episodes coming out. Like if I have a guest spot, I try to get those out sooner rather than later. And so, but like as I was making show notes, I was like, okay, well, I got to talk about Halo. I got to talk about Battlefield. I got to talk about this movie, and like I didn't want to just push those things aside. And so I just kept making show notes, and I realized there's a lot of topics here, but I'm going to finally get them done. I'm going to go through it. I'm going to release the episode when it's done. So I recorded that thing over the course of several days, if not weeks. And then that was truly just how it came out in the edit. When I finally got done talking about every bit that I wanted to talk about, the episode came out to be 7 hours and 39 minutes. And yeah, for those that saw that and said, I'm not going to listen to that, I don't blame you. I don't blame you. You should not consume that much of my voice in any capacity. But for those that did cherry pick through it, great. Thank you for being there. And for whatever amount of people out there decided I'm going to listen to the whole thing front to back, thank you. But also, what are you doing? Like, yeah, do not devote that much time to the podcast. Like, get out there, go do something. But like, yeah, look, the format for the podcast is not ironclad. Sometimes episodes are 40 minutes, sometimes they're an hour and a half, sometimes they're 3 hours. And in this case, it ended up being 7.5. But yeah, that was just because I had so much stuff I wanted to get off the plate, so to speak. And yeah, just I hope people like it, and I hope that well, look, inside that episode, there's going to be a topic for everyone. I covered everything, so like, click on it, if you dare. But yeah, just the reactions to that one coming out were funny too. They were like, "Dude, what are you doing? Like, you're nuts." And I was like, "I know," but it's just that, yeah, what are you gonna do? And that's it. That's essentially the history of the podcast. At least everything that is quote, you know, noteworthy in my opinion. Kind of since that 7 hour episode, I've just done more, kind of week to week releases and so on and so forth. And I've had more guests on in the past. And, to everyone who's contributed, from every guest to every person who's listened, who's made material for the show, I want to sincerely say thank you for your support. Thank you for your friendship. Thank you for helping me make this into something. As I said, I don't know what I want this to be. I have an idea, but it's not cemented, and also I don't know where this will go. It could get big, it could regress, or it could stay just the way it is right now, of just getting a couple views every episode, a couple subscribers, and a couple of likes. And if so, that's okay, because I learned now that I don't need to achieve perfection, whatever that looks like. And I should just do this just because I want to do it, just because I view it to be fun and a way to provide an outlet for myself. And if people find it educational and entertaining along the way, then that's perfect. Then that is perfection. If people honestly come away with with something positive from this, then great. If I can foster discussion, then that makes it all worth the journey. And so just thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing it, and however, in whatever capacity you choose to. It truly means a lot to me. And now to kind of close out the show here, I just want to just go over a few things, a few actual bits of news and topics and stuff like that. At the time of this recording, the Minnesota Vikings, they just played the Green Bay Packers. I'm recording this bit on the 24th um, to mark exactly the 1 year anniversary. But yeah, the Minnesota Vikings lost in spectacular fashion to the Green Bay Packers. We lost 23-6, and look, I've talked about the Vikings before. If you've listened to the podcast before, this is going to sound like a broken drum, but I just mean this sincerely. J.J. McCarthy is my guy. He is my quarterback. As I've said before, and I'll say it again, I was there, literally in the building at U.S. Bank Stadium when he got announced to be our draft pick for, the first round for our new QB, for the franchise QB. Look, I understand he was not the first choice of the organization. He was not the second choice. He was not my first choice or my second choice either. But he's still our QB. We still got him. And it's been a rocky road. He got injured his first year. His second year, now under the contract, which is right now, is technically his first year on the field. And it's been to mixed results. And I say mixed being, I'm being very polite when I say that. It has not been good. But I mean this sincerely. Uh, his development, his progression with this team, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I remain hopeful in him. I choose to be hopeful in him. Am I being naive? Maybe. Am I drinking too much purple Kool-Aid? Maybe I am. But he's young, literally. He's in his early 20s. He doesn't have a full season under his belt yet. And there are issues. There are. But there are also flashes of potential greatness. And I choose to be hopeful, and I choose to be in for the long haul. I don't want to cut him. I don't think he's a bust. I think he literally just needs training and practice. And the best way now that he can get that is to quite literally play football. Even if he goes out there and he throws two picks every game, gets sacked 4 times, and throws for under 100 yards, like at some point he's going to throw one pick and get sacked only twice, and then he's going to throw 105, and then eventually he won't throw a pick. Then he'll throw 150, and yada yada. He will get better. It just takes time. It takes reps. He needs reps, and I'm all in on him. He made team history getting drafted the way that he did, and he could literally be our QB for the next 10 years. He could be. He could be. His contract, I think, is for 4 years. He's now on year 2 out of 4. If he lights it up in 26 and 27, that extension is going to come hot, and it's going to be great. And I hope I'm right about that. I hope that he is the face of the franchise because, again, I got to witness team history, and so the idea that we're just going to sweep that under the rug, I think is just crazy. And I think to the fandom at large, we need to trust the process. It might be a long process, but we do. I really think we are judging him prematurely based off a small sample size. We are. He's played what, 6 games now? Yeah, 6 games or 6 weeks. That's a lot of time. It's like I get that, but it's not. I think we need to talk about this in terms of seasons, not weeks. At least that's my opinion. And so I hope that going forward, everyone can take a chill pill. I hope that we can have faith in our coaching staff, in the front office, and in the player himself, J.J. McCarthy, to just develop. And look, 2025 is not our year. I understand that. And that sucks, because football only comes once a year. And so now the idea that we're going to reset and look to next year, okay, next year is still a good amount of time away. I get that. It stinks. But like, my spirit is not broken for this team. My spirit is not broken for McCarthy. I still remain hopeful, even if I'm alone in that. But yeah, I look, you want to see your team win however they can, and for us to lose, not great, but uh, I'm I'm in on him, and I'm going to trust the process, and I hope that you out there, if you're a Vikings fan, if you're a JJ McCarthy hater or lover, I hope that you're thinking, you know what, this isn't great, but it's potential to be great, and so I'm going to try to focus on that. So yeah, um, the purple rain will come, kids. It will. It might take time. We might be in a bit of a drought right now, but it will get here. We just got to be patient, and yeah, just trust the process. Just trust the process. But kids, why stop there? Surely you want some positivity when it comes to your Minnesota sports, and there is positivity, but it's not on the turf. It's actually on the ice because the Minnesota Wild, at the time of this recording, on the 24th, they're on a 5-game win streak. 5 games in a row now we've won, and yeah, look, I'm new to my hockey fandom. I've only been to one game, and this is really my first kind of full season. I got into them last year during the playoffs, and it's been a slow start for Wild in 2025, but now we seem to be hitting our stride. And I'm happy to see my team winning, and I think we've got really fun players, and I think hockey is a really fun sport. I think it's kind of niche in terms of its appeal, but I think it can get bigger, and I think it should be bigger because it's really fun and it's really electric to see it, with your own two eyes, in the flesh. To go to a real game, the TV just doesn't do it justice. And also just like with this graphic in particular, the one that you're seeing right now, like I believe one of the goalies, if not both of our goalies on the Wild, are Swedish, and so like for the team to then use Swedish House Mafia as kind of like a graphic to promote them and the team, like that's crazy because I love Swedish House Mafia. Like I'm such a huge fan of EDM music and I love them in particular, and so like the fact that one of my favorite teams in sports is now referencing one of my favorite bands and musical acts, in existence right now. Like for me, that's crazy. I had this huge grin on my face, just ear to ear, when I saw that because it's like, oh my gosh, it's like like Minnesota's acknowledging one of my favorite things, like and so yeah, it's just crazy the fact that they did that. But that's just two of my favorite things coming together, and yeah, Minnesota Wild, they're winning, baby, they're winning, and so look, if you're sick of the Vikings, and if you're not feeling, the Wolves, and if you're downcast about the Twins and what they are, what they could be, look to the ice, look to hockey, because the Wild right now we're winning, and yeah, hockey is a very fun sport, lots of energy out there with those guys, and so if you haven't checked it out via TV or whatnot, give it a chance, and then if you like it at some point, I mean, even if you're like still kind of on the fence, go to a game, experience hockey like at an actual game and an arena. You're gonna get just roped in. It's amazing, and so yeah, to see the Wild winning is spectacular, and to see them reference, like I said, Swedish House Mafia is pretty great. So yeah, there are bright spots to the Minnesota sports pantheon, as it were. All right, kids, and now we've come to the end, and that's as I said, I broke down the history of the podcast, and I talked about a few topics that I wanted to discuss in the world of Minnesota sports. But there is one more thing that I want to leave you with, one more really special treat, in my opinion. I wanted to do something special for the 1 year anniversary of the podcast, and so while I appreciate all my past, present, and future guests on the podcast. This guy in particular is really kind of hitting it out of the park for me, and just the idea that he's going to be a part of the podcast is a huge deal. And like I'm so thankful to have got connected to him in the way that we did. Truly was by chance, and you know him from various movies such as John Carter and Battleship, and you can watch him in the new Amazon Prime series, The Terminal List, Dark Wolf. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Taylor Kitsch. Whoa, 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 whoa. Hold it, hold it, hold it, hold it. What?
What do you mean? He couldn't make it? Why? Why could he not make it? What's going on? We have this all set up. What's going on with him? He's too busy hand knitting sweaters for homeless children. Well, it is the season of giving, so I guess I can't complain. But yeah, well, we're gonna have to wrap up the show, I guess. So my apologies to Taylor Kitsch. We ran out of time, and he's busy off providing his services to the people as he should. But next time, kids, we'll make sure to get Taylor Kitsch on at some point. You can come on the podcast proper. But thank you so much for watching and for listening. I hope you enjoyed the first year of the Far Out podcast, and I hope you'll stick around for the next year and so on and so forth. And yeah, just thanks so much for supporting me and however you can. And I've been the host, and you've been the Far Out audience, and I'll see you in the next one. All right, bye-bye.